people feel so pressured about the idea of time around the decision for kids, and that like the clock is ticking. I mean, especially for women, it's like you're constantly told that the clock is ticking. And so it gets to this point of like so much urgency where you're like, well, I have to figure out getting married and finding the partner and finding the stability and finding the place. Otherwise, then the choice is made for me. And so when you talk about, like you said, the word freedom, to me, that is very like on point, because it saying like, no, I don't have to have those other things first. It frees up your ability to say, well, the choice isn't made for me. I get to make the choice.
I'm Keltie McGuire, and you're listening to the Kids Are Childfree podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Kids Are Childfree podcast. Today, I have a very, very interesting story to share with you, and I'm super excited about this one because it turns so many of the ideas that we have about what it means to create a family and the circumstances in our lives that we need in order to have a child. It just turns those ideas right on their head in the best way possible. Now, I came across a viral video a few months ago on Instagram by an account called Storyworth, and it posed the question, what does it mean to create a family? And this account featured the story of Platonic life partners, Andrew and Amrita, and their decision to have a child together. And naturally, I was so fascinated by this story because it's one that we don't commonly see or hear. And of course, there are different ways in which to have a child or children. And of course, families can take all different forms. They're not just ones in which we have kids, but a family can also be a couple. We can be in a family with our pets. And so, of course, I immediately had to reach out to these two and invite them onto the podcast. And Amrita was able to join me for a conversation about how she and Andrew decided to have a child together and what life is like for the two of them as co-parents. Now, before we get into things, I just want to share a little bit about Amrita and Andrew. They are Platonic life partners, as I mentioned, as well as artistic co-conspirators and parents to a good baby. They write, they podcast, they broadcast, they produce, they sing, they create collaborative art on stage and on screen, and they reimagine family life as Platonic co-parents to their son. All of these things contribute to their central vision where direct human connection is at the center. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, and then we will start more from the beginning of your story because it's a unique one. So.
My name's Amrita. I'm speaking to you from Brooklyn, New York, where I've been based for the past 18 years. I am a freelancer. I have my own business. I do produce live events, work in the arts. I'm also a writer. Speaking with you today, I think in the capacity of kind of my unconventional family choice. I am coming to this call after just dropping off my 2-year-old son at daycare, who I co-parent with my best friend. So right now we are living together. We are co-parenting our child together and sort of navigating an untraditional family path. I'm not romantically involved with my co-parent. We have never been romantically involved. We're best friends. We've known each other for, my gosh, like 15 years almost, I think. We were just talking about this, that I think we can now officially say we're like in old friends territory. Yeah. But yeah, we've been best friends for a long time, business partners for a large part of this time as well. And so the co-parenting is a more recent and in some ways unexpected turn to our relationship that has definitely changed the dynamic over the last couple of years. But yeah, it's been an adventure, and it's going to very much continue to be an adventure.
Absolutely. Well, happy friendiversary. I can remember a sidebar story, but I have a friend I've known since I was 3. And I remember it was like our 25-year friendiversary. And we were like trying to get drinks for free at the bar. This was back in our, like early it might have been our 20-year anniversary, but I'd say, milk it for what it's worth. So it's funny because you talking about this long-standing and very multi-layered relationship in the sense of like your business partners, your life partners, your parenting partner, but life partner, let me rewind that because of course we want to hear, how you define this relationship. But in some sense, this person probably to a depth and have had experience with them beyond what a lot of people have before they consider having a child with someone. And yet, as you say, it is unconventional or non-traditional. And these are the kinds of stories that I would love to highlight more, because we don't see or hear them very often. And I think it's probably why, would you say people are quite fascinated with your situation and your story?
I think it's definitely a source of fascination. It's a source of curiosity. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and again, for the most part, really in a positive way, and just
Yeah.
curious about how it works for us and like how we got to this place. And it's something that
Yeah.
we write about a lot. We've actually podcasted about as well, kind of talking about the decision. So I won't perseverate on that so much, but like the journey to get there. But yeah, definitely, I think it's been a source of a lot of curiosity and fascination. And I think, to my mind, people are really interested and like I think kind of hungry for alternative storylines and finding other ways to
Yeah.
do this, because like I think on a, I can definitely speak to it from a personal level, but I think sort of on a generational level, I just turned 40. So I think a lot, the
Mm-hmm.
conversation about whether to have kids, how to have kids, what the format to have kids has been like such a huge part of like our friend hangouts, dinner table conversations the last couple
Yeah.
years, especially for our friends who are single and, navigating that decision of like, where does it fall in my priorities to have kids versus to find a partner? And, these are really
Yeah.
difficult, like sort of conversations to navigate. So I think that it's like, it's more than just at our dinner table. Like I think a lot of people of my age range, especially like at least in America and the
Yeah.
climate that
No,
I'm
I can say it's
okay. Yeah.
global.
I don't
Speaking
want
with
I don't
people
want
in
to
many countries. Yeah.
overgeneralize, but I think like,
No.
with a lot of issues around cost of living and just sort of like current
Mm-hmm.
events and the how difficult it is to like buy a home and find stability. So I think people are really shying away from or finding themselves unable to sort of meet these mile
Yeah.
markers that maybe their parents or their grandparents were able to do, of
Yeah.
like getting married, moving into a house, having kids, and sort of like checking off these boxes that are meant to be like the right order or like doing life
Yeah.
correctly. And I think a lot of people of like sort of my like elder millennial, whatever you want to call it, generation are struggling to maybe check those boxes, or finding maybe they don't want to check those boxes and trying to find other
Yeah.
storylines of like, so I think that's part of what drives the curiosity about.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I would agree. And I mean, this is what I'm seeing and hearing from so many folks in different parts of the world and, predominantly Europe, North America, but we've got listeners all kinds of places, which is very exciting. I think in a way, although we can say with every sort of choice or possible path we have, when we have that privilege, it can lead to a lot of overwhelm to make this and the associated decisions. But at the same time, that can also bring freedom, because if, for example, we hinge having a child on also having met the right partner, having, had a certain sort of stability in our living situation, having the home, etc. Like that's a lot of different kind of
Mhm.
hoops to jump through, right? Whereas I realize it's hard, but if we can almost separate those things out and being like, they might be the same thing, but they
A
might not be, right?
hundred
And having a
percent, a
child,
100%. I
yeah,
think you really get to the core of something that I feel like I've been unlocking, or like sort of unlocked in making the decision to have a kid, is
yeah,
changing the around the order of operations. And
mm-hmm.
I do think that people really feel, or I felt this too, that there was a certain order that things needed to unfold in. And even if I
Yeah,
was going to have a kid in a non-traditional format, that there was still this idea that like we had the conversations about this before, for a while before we decided to actually like pull the trigger. And I think like in my mind, it's like, yeah, well, you have to have a certain professional stability. You have to maybe like have your romantic life sorted out. You have to have these other things
mm-hmm.
in place. And then it's kind of like, well, what if you don't? what what if
Yeah,
your priority is that you don't have to have all those things in that exact order, and you can just kind of separate them and let them
yeah,
unfold on their own timelines, and kind of pursue it that way. And it is hard because I think, it fights against a lot of cultural programming that we have about what the right way is to do things and the right order is. But I do think like there's also something about time where people feel so pressured about the idea of time around the decision for kids, and that like the clock is ticking. I mean, especially for women, it's like you're constantly told that the clock is ticking. And so if it gets to this point of like so much urgency where you're like, well, I have to figure out getting married and finding the partner and finding the stability and finding the place. Otherwise, then the choice is made for me. And so when you talk about, like you said, the word freedom, to me, that is very like on point, because it saying like, no, I don't have to have those other things first. It frees up your ability to say, well, the choice isn't made for me. I get to make the choice.
Totally. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it gives people a greater sense of agency in this process. And sometimes it's like, no, I don't want those other things at all. And at the same time, we can still have them. It just might be, like you say, not in the order that's predictable,
maybe
or
the
that's been
decision is that you
prescribed.
decide you don't want to have kids, but you at least feel empowered to say, like, I'm making this decision because I've decided it's not right for me, versus it's because I didn't find the right person, or the right person hasn't chosen me, or that sort of narrative, which I think leads to more sadness or resentment about your decision if you feel like it wasn't within your power to make it.
Totally. Yeah. And I think all of us, to one degree or another, there will be circumstances that help inform our decision. But I always encourage people, like, can you find your own reasons, even if the decision is largely dictated by external forces? Like, let's say someone says, yeah, I would have loved to have had a child and I want to do that with a partner and I haven't met that person. Like, can you essentially sort of create evidence, if you will, that supports the fact that this is also a good path for you to be child free, even though you might have had preference for something else?
No, totally.
Yeah. Okay, so did you know that you wanted to be a mom from, the word go?
Not at all. Actually, this is a huge part of why I was so interested in talking to you and being on this podcast. Is I actually am coming to it from where I felt like the decision was made in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
I felt so convicted that I wanted to be child free, like by choice for life. To the point where it was actually like, I'm only really processing this now, honestly, like a couple years into parenthood, that like it really was like I felt like it was a part of my identity, really wanting to be child free, because I think it's still like, as much as many people are doing it and choosing not to have children, it still feels like the more taboo choice, or I don't know if it's taboo is the right word, but it's especially as a woman, you really have to push back against like what society expects of you. That's still true. It's still as true, as it was decades ago. And so I think like when you're taking sort of to me, it felt like it's a little bit of a defensive stance against the world to be like, no, I really have decided this. I really feel strongly about this. So in that sense, that's what I mean when I feel like it was sort of a part of my identity that I really felt like, and I still feel so much like tenderness and like fierce protectiveness over people who do choose to remain child free, because I just so empathize with some of the judgment that can come from that, with that decision. So I think like I've been really trying to interrogate like kind of how what made me change my mind. And I think, when you look back, it's like you can try to put an easy narrative to it. So I can try to do that. I don't know how much I can't tell you that there was a moment where I had an epiphany and I thought, actually, I'm going to take this path I never really had thought of before. And I think I actually just was thinking about this week that for most people, we don't really have I don't know if I'm generalizing. I don't feel like I have moments of epiphany.
No, I agree.
It's like sort of an accumulation of a lot of small moments where then you finally get to a point where you're like, oh, actually my mindset is different than it was, but not like a bolt from the blue. So I really felt very strongly about it. And I think like yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to start on like how to explain the change. But I,
Yeah.
part of it was having a really close relationship with my best friend. We hadn't discussed, we never really used the words that we were like life partners or platonic partners or anything like that
Mm-hmm.
before like early in our relationship. We didn't use terms like that. We were very close. But just
Yeah.
knowing that, okay, this is a person who's going to be in my life forever. And if and when he has kids, those kids are going to be in my life. I'm going to be involved in their lives. Like that was part of, this developing this friendship, from early on. It's just kind of knowing
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this is like really a very important person in my life. It's going to remain an important person in my life.
Yeah.
And I think as we grew closer and we sort of, it's like initially, like early on in our friendship, had these conversations like, oh, I was like, well, if you want to have kids at some point, like I could like help you. I could be an egg donor or whatever. To explain, my co-parent Andrew is a gay man. So, obviously his paths to parenthood would have been different to begin with. So like,
Yeah.
I think like many people over a cocktail or two or whatever, it's like, I was like, oh yeah, I could like, I could like help you sometime down the line. That felt like that was going to be miles in the future. We weren't really thinking about it in real terms.
Yeah.
And then it sort of, it was like, well, that's actually a possibility. We could do that. And so it was like sort of a really slow evolution from, okay, well, I could help you conceive a child. I could maybe carry the child.
Mm-hmm.
I would want to be involved as a like sort of interested adult, like, as an auntie figure in your kid's life.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't really until the pandemic hit and, we were business partners. Our business was like completely decimated by the pandemic. And we became roommates for the first time during that time. We moved out of our apartment to save money in New York. We are like traveling around a little bit, nomadic, homeless, some might say. And
No, the rebrand.
yeah, really. I mean, and so I think the tenor of the conversations changed during that time because I think there was a lot of uh, we had a lot of time. We had a lot of time to think about
Yeah.
what was really important and kind of what we wanted to prioritize in life, what I wanted to prioritize in life individually. And so it was kind of during that time that I thought, well, what if instead of just like a auntie figure, like I was actually a parental figure. And I had to really
Yeah.
wrap my head around that very slowly because it was not what I had envisioned, for my life. And I had a lot of, I think, specifically ingrained ideas about motherhood and being a mom and
Mm-hmm.
all the baggage that comes with that word. Um, and that concept and like the idea of like motherhood being uniquely something where you have to sacrifice your identity or you have to sacrifice your
Yeah.
artistic spirit or whatever. I'm not saying that that's true, but I'm saying that that was how it felt to me. Or that
Yeah.
like the stereotype felt very real to me that was something that would be expected in motherhood is to like sort of give up what your own desires are in order to become a mother.
Yeah.
So for me, that was like such a big part of, I had to detangle that a lot before I could, I didn't even use the word mom. I'm not sure if I've said this like out loud before, but like I couldn't even use the word mom to describe myself, even after I had a child for a little
Yeah.
while. It felt cognitively like what's the word I'm thinking of? Dissonant. Yeah.
Dissonant.
Where I was like, mom,
Yeah.
who's like, I'm a mom. Like
Are
me?
you talking to me?
Me?
I suppose this
That's
child's mine,
weird. Yeah.
but
So like it felt like even
yeah.
now, sometimes even 2 years into this like, being a mom, I'm like, still
Yeah.
have these moments where I'm like, oh, this is surreal. Because I think, for
Mm.
people who may have envisioned it all along in their lives, like, oh, I always wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
It feels like, okay, yeah, I'm settling into this thing that I had imagined for myself. I had never imagined myself in this role. So there's still moments where I'm like, oh, wow, this is so weird. Like that, this is my life.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've said a lot there, but yeah, it was definitely a slow like evolution over time.
Yeah.
That probably when I try to summarize it, it sounds like a complete about face where it's like, I was so decided and now I've decided this other thing. But it
Yeah.
did feel, I mean, this is over the course of several years. So it really
Yeah.
unfolded at, I think a really like natural, pace in real time.
Yeah. Honestly, that's the experience I hear from, I would say, most people who have been either ambivalent or on the fence. In your case, I mean, you were clear on that child-free path, but when it comes to that change of heart, like, I think part of the illusion many of us are under is that we're going to have this light bulb moment, this epiphany, as you put it. I often tell people and describe my own decision as like, it's not like a light switch, but it's more, I've never had the privilege of having one of these fancy Philips wake up alarm clocks or whatever they're called, but I've heard about them. It's like a slow dawning of like, okay, the pieces of the puzzle are starting to align, that like we're seeing more and more clearly, oh, maybe that actually is the path I want to take. And I mean, it sounds like as well, it's not like you did, as you put it, like an about face, i.e., like your previous feelings and reservations about motherhood just disappeared. Like it sounds like there's still that person within you who sort of shirks at, oh God, okay, mom, and what does that mean? And by the way, like I appreciate you saying, well, that's not necessarily true, but those are the concerns that I hear from so many women when they think about taking on this role, like one of total sacrifice and
Mm-hmm.
martyrdom, if you will, and a total loss of identity and having to step fully into that role, and just how heavy motherhood can feel, because that is the reality for
Mm-hmm.
many
And
women.
I mean, I'll just be totally real with you, and you can decide how
Yeah.
much you feel like is appropriate for your audience. But
It's all appropriate here. We're not sugarcoating
so,
anything. So no, nothing will be
okay, well,
edited.
I think that idea of
Unless you
martyr.
want me
No,
to.
no, I'm fine with it. This is my viewpoint. But like the idea
Yeah.
of martyrdom and sort of self sacrifice is such a prevailing idea of what it means to be a mother, but it's also specifically, especially within like a heterosexual context. So when
Yeah.
you
I'm
are a
glad you said
woman
that.
who's married to a man, there is so much expectation about like what the workload is going to be, that you're going to be more invested in being a parent than your male partner, that you are, you know, between the two of you, who is the one who's expected to sacrifice more. And I think even if you are in an egalitarian relationship and you view yourselves as equal, and you have a male partner who is eager
Mm-hmm.
to have children or wants to have children, it's not about your sort of I'm not talking about you, the individual. I'm talking about like the macro level. The macro level is
Yeah.
the reality is we all live in the same world. We all live in the same world. We all live in the same like society, and the expectations that we're in, we're all in the same soup. So even if you yourself
Yeah.
are like, well, we're not going to be like that. We're going to have a 50-50 relationship. We're going to have, this type of dynamic. You can't really, it's very difficult to untangle that from the world that we live in and the expectations that are placed on you
Yeah.
externally, without even really knowing it. And I think, that was something for me where, like, I'm not trying to like drag anybody, but like even the relationships that I observed from my friends and my
Mm-hmm.
family, for people who really like view themselves to have a very equal relationship, from the outside, it didn't appear that way to me. It always felt like that
Yeah.
as a woman, you are going to be expected to do more, expected to intrinsically somehow, that once you have a kid, your like parental brain unlocks, and then you're suddenly that,
Yeah.
instinctually what to do. And I thought, well, that's not me. I know I know that if I'm in a dynamic where I'm expected to, definitely by society, by my family, by my partner, even, to, on some level, subconsciously, the expectation is that I'm going to know what to do, or I'm going to want this more,
Yeah.
or that I'm going to, be the one to sacrifice things more. I like so violently rejected that idea, and wanting to, and that dynamic felt like a trap to me. It felt like a prison to me. It felt like narrowing your world down into this one thing of motherhood. So that to me was part like why I felt so strongly that I was like, I don't want to do this, because in my mind, the only context that I could imagine having kids in was like in a, monogamous, or, not what am I trying to say? Nuclear partnered setup with a male partner. And like that, I just didn't want that. I didn't want I didn't see any versions of it like around me that I felt like, oh, I really want to have that dynamic. And so for however that sounds, I don't know if that like resonates with other people, but like for me, I was like, oh, no way. Like I can't do that. And I always feel like weird about saying this out loud a little bit, because I never want other people to feel like I'm judging their decision to do it. Like if you are very happy to be in that type of dynamic, that's so great. I'm like so happy that that works for you. So it's not me saying like that's a worser way to do it, but like for me, it just viscerally was like, this is not it. And I think, going back to our comment about ambivalence too, that, I think it's much more common for the like in a heterosexual dynamic, for the male partner to experience ambivalence about parenthood is, I think, more accepted even after you have a kid. But it's less so accepted. So if I'm like, if I'm the person who's on the fence and I don't really feel like, and I know that I'm going to maybe I'll continue to be a little bit on the fence about this even after I have a kid. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about this. I don't know if I'm a natural fit for this. I don't know if I have a maternal instinct. I still don't know if I have a maternal instinct. With having a 2-year-old, like I think that on some level, maybe some people do have a parental brain that unlocks. Turns out that's not me. I didn't feel like, oh, my kid was born and I suddenly like accessed this new set of secret knowledge or something. So I think it's like a lot of it is these sort of gender baggage, like relationship baggage, like gender power dynamics, that for me made it initially unimaginable to be a mom. And it wasn't until I started, even again, gradually the daylight clock, the alarm clock coming on, of being like, oh, but am I actually opposed to the idea of being a mom? Or am I opposed to the idea of the concept of mom within the context of being married to a man and like, in a nuclear family? And what does it free up for me if I think about like, well, are there other contexts for me to do this? Again, initially thinking like as an auntie to my gay best friend's children. And then as like thinking about that idea, I was like, well, what if we take that a step further, and we're actually maybe equal partners in this? And so that's sort of the dawning of it, was like, well, I just always assumed that kids were going to happen in this particular way if they were going to happen. But what if they didn't?
It's so interesting. Essentially had the opportunity to be able to like question and rewrite things. You could say everyone has that sort of ability, but of course, depending on relationship status, or if you happen to have a wonderful gay best friend or not who wants to have a child, it's like that's going to be a different story. I'm interested, and of course, I'm sure people are like, okay, so how did this all come to be, and what's it like, and how are you raising your child, et cetera. But I'm curious to know, do you think that, because of course, we can say that in some ways you've turned gender norms on their head, as far as, okay, we're not romantically partnered. He's a man, but he's a gay man, et cetera. But you're still, cisgender man and woman who they're like, I'm wondering how much have you been able to sort of like skirt or step outside of certain gender norms and also expectations from the external people, forces, society? And how much do you feel like that still exists because you are a man and a woman raising a child together?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because the reality is we are a man and a woman raising a baby. And and as I was just saying, like, we all live in the same world. So it's like, just because we've made an unconventional choice doesn't free us entirely from expectations. I would say that in some ways, I think we've been able to navigate our relationship more in the way that like a queer couple would. And I think you see you see less of these sorts of obviously like gender power dynamics in gay couples or lesbian couples, because there is the expectation that you will rewrite it, or you'll write it your own way, or you'll figure out your own balance of labor or parenting responsibilities, things like that. So in that regard, I feel like we are closer to that style of parenting, to queer couples, where everything has been very pre-discussed and negotiated, and not negotiated, that sounds cold, but discussed a lot more, I think, than your average romantically paired like hetero couple, because I think there's a lot that goes unspoken, but there's, even just from a legal standpoint, there's many things that can't go unspoken if you have a relationship like ours. You're trying to establish like what the parenting relationship will look like, what's the legal relationship to our child or children, like those are all things you have to discuss in advance. And we've talked about this on our podcast. We did like a questionnaire that was from the fertility clinic, like with a psychiatrist, like all these things, where we and then we also independently we sought legal counsel from an entity called the Chosen Family Law Center in New York that navigates co-parenting relationships or non-traditional families, or even some cases where there's maybe more than two parents, or things like that. And so they have a lot of experience with dynamics like ours, but also things like that are all sorts of different setups. And so we chose to go through them to do some documents that like helped us think through all these different questions of how do we want to raise our children, like all these sorts of things, where as we were going through the questions, it's like everybody should do this. This is great.
I was about to say that, like, what a blessing in a way that you were somehow, in a sense, forced to have to ask these questions, because I'm like, everybody should be asking these questions.
And I think like, and it's not, they're not even like crazy questions. A lot of them are just sort of about like parenting style or, schooling, discipline, religion, things like this, about like how you're going to raise your kid. And sometimes I think, a lot goes assumed when you have a romantic partner of like, of course we're going to be in alignment on this, or we'll be able to figure it out. But it's almost like knowing in advance what your points of disagreement are going to be. Like you may not align on 100% of the things in advance, but at least knowing like, oh, okay, well, this might end up being a thing we have to navigate, helps it be less of a conflict. So, but to answer your, like, I think to your point, like to my, what I'm trying to answer here is like, in that sense, I think the norms, we have successfully disrupted a lot of the norms, and also done a lot of work to think about really like division of labor and how we manage that. There are certain, but the flip side of the coin is, there are certain things we cannot, like, I mean, the biggest one obviously is like biology. Probably Andrew would have been better at being pregnant than I was. He's a very like sort of regimented person, very, disciplined and stoic, and I'm pretty stoic too. But the point is like, the reality is like, it's my body. I have to be the one to carry the child. That's always going to be that we can't equalize. And that has a long tail. Like that's going to, my body is forever changed. And, and that's part of it. So I think to me, that's like the biggest one, that it's like, we can't subvert that norm. And then, but I think to your question about like sort of how much expectation is placed on us, I actually, I think we tend to be pretty cognizant of that when it does happen. Like something that's been interesting is like, for instance, our kid is in daycare. There's like maybe 7 or 8 other families that go to that daycare. Some are single parents, but most are married couples. And I think because visually we can just pass for a man and a woman raising a baby, that I think the assumption is that we're married and that we're, like whatever. why would somebody think otherwise, I guess. So I think like in some contexts, it doesn't really matter to me to like clarify that. Like, why does the daycare teacher need to know what my like sexual relationship is to my co-parent?
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Effectively, that's the only, well, I shouldn't say it's the only difference. And maybe you can talk about in a moment, like what are the differences otherwise? But yeah, I mean, aside from that, you're like where the child's
right.
concerned.
So in some cases,
where the
like
child's parents.
we just let it lie because it's like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Like if she thinks we're married, like why am I going to be pedantic about it? It doesn't matter. So I do think like probably there are some external expectations and from certain people who aren't read in on it or whatever. But I don't know how much of an impact I would say that has like on our day to day. And yeah, and I mean, I think there are things on both sides where sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm always the person who like finds a babysitter. Why am I the person who's always dealing with that or something, you know? And I'm like, that feels like it's sort of gendered, you know, or something. But like, but then on the flip side of it, there's like, well, like Andrew's like the only person who ever like gives our kid a bath, you know, or like, you know.
Thank goodness, hey?
I mean, I would do it obviously if he wasn't here, but that's like a thing that he does, you know. So it's like, I don't know. Like, I mean, it's not all. It's definitely not all like kumbaya. We've figured out everything out. We've cracked the code, and we're like living on a different plane of gender equity. And definitely there are still assumptions about. I mean, like, you know, the doctor's office calls me. You know, stuff like that.
Those are examples I hear, like daycare, like your kid's sick and you're like, why? Like,
yeah,
why
I mean, our daycare is pretty good about that.
Contact?
They have both of our numbers, and they actually don't really, they're pretty old school. So they're not like one of these newfangled things where they're constantly contacting you about things. They don't send us pictures throughout the day. It's great. He's happy there.
Good.
He's doing, he's living his day. I'm living my day. So it's all good. But yeah, definitely like, and I think that will continue to be the case, like as he gets into grade school and stuff like that, where it's like, hello, like we'll have to sort of be conscious about that, where it's like, I'm not the primary parent just because I'm his mom.
All right. If you missed the news, I want to share it with you here. And that is we have 2 brand new support series that are kicking off in February. Now, if you are not familiar with our support series, we've got the Kids Are Child-Free support series, and we've got the Confidently Child-Free support series. The first of which, the Kids Are Child-Free one, is for those of you who are still very much on the fence. You're unsure which way you're ultimately going to land. And the Confidently Child-Free support series is for any of you who are pretty sure child-free is the path for you, or who have already chosen that path. Now, what these are is they are monthly 2-hour workshops on different topics related to either, again, the Kids Are Child-Free choice or being child-free in the case of the Confidently Child-Free support series. You can attend each session standalone, so you can purchase a ticket for $59 for each of these workshops, or you can attend all 6 of them with our All Access Pass, which is $236. Now, what's happening, first of all, this month in February is we have a session called Culture in Your Choice as part of our Kids Are Child-Free support series. That's happening on February 24th. And we're going to talk about all the different aspects of culture, whether that is the culture in which you were brought up, whether that pertains to, religion or faith. That could be culture in terms of our pronatalist society that we live in. We're going to talk about how culture might be getting in the way of this decision and helping you sort of see through the different aspects of culture and how they might be impacting you in this decision and shaping the decision. On the Confidently Child-Free support series side, our session is happening on February 26th. That session is called An Extraordinary Life. That's a mouthful. You can't see it, but the extra is in parentheses, because there is this idea as a child-free person that you need to go out there and, win a Nobel Peace Prize if you're going to be child-free. But the thing is, you can live a beautiful, ordinary life, and it can be meaningful and impactful and inspirational in its simplicity. And that can be, of course, extraordinary. Hence my little cool title that I've created. Check out that session. We're going to be working through, again, this narrative that life needs to be something really noteworthy and impactful on a broad scale in order to be a good life. And we're going to look at how you can create beauty and meaning and fulfillment in the life that you are living, both today as well as in thinking about the future. All right, the details on both those support series and those particular sessions for February will be found in the show notes of today's episode. Let's get back to my conversation today.
So you mentioned, people think we're married. So to clarify, you're not married. There was legal proceedings, if you will, that needed to happen in order. Like, is that straightforward as far as it? And maybe I should also ask, you carried the child. It's Andrew's sperm.
It's our biological
like
child. Both of our biological.
Yeah.
Both of our biological child. That's a weird grammatical construction.
Yeah, I know. I also was
anyway, he's related to both of us biologically. I did carry the child. Went through the whole pregnancy, delivery, all of that. Yeah, we don't have a domestic partnership. It is a little bit bizarre, but it's a little bit in the weeds. I don't know how it works legally in other places, but at least in New York State, our child was born here in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
There's some really weird establishment of parentage stuff where if you aver if you're an unmarried couple, any unmarried couple, whether you're romantically involved or not, if you sign, there's some paperwork that you sign with the registrar in the hospital before they issue the birth certificate, you can leave, whatever. It basically, if you read the fine print, what you're testifying to is that the child was conceived through natural sexual intercourse or something like that. That is how legally they establish parentage, is that you just basically have to sign a form that says, yeah, we fucked. And and that's sort of the legal establishment of parenthood. So before we went into the hospital, we were working with this chosen family law center, and it's it is actually a little bit thornier to establish parenthood if you conceive the child not through sex or whatever, all this different stuff.
Okay. That's the question on people's minds, right?
Some people, people do ask that, which I think is sort of, it's how are babies made? And I'm
yeah, totally. I was going to say, we don't ask other people how did you?
We did sort of IUI, or as more crassly, the turkey baster method,
I used that term with my German husband the other day, and he's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "It's pretty much
I don't think everybody. I don't know if in the history of time anyone has actually used a turkey baster for such a thing, but
oh, for sure they have.
But yeah, so it's kind of the Andrew calls it the new old fashioned way, but because we did it, we it's at home, but we whatever. Yeah. So without getting too gruesome in the details, the point is that we sort of were well, we just signed the paper at the hospital because because first of all, I think natural sex is kind of a up for interpretation sort of term, and it was just well, let's not stir something up that doesn't need to be stirred up. The intent here is to say to establish, I am his biological mom. Andrew's his biological dad. That's all that needs to really be established here. But it is actually kind of legally thorny. It can be really legally thorny. There's a really sidebar, but there was a really terrible case that might still be unfolding right now where an unmarried romantic couple, where the mom died in childbirth or died just after childbirth. And because they hadn't yet had the chance to sign that form or whatever, there was no legal parentage that had been established for the dad, even though he is the biological parent of this child, which is insane and bizarre to me that this is a man who's been fighting now for I think almost 2 years to get custody of his child.
This is in the States,
this
by
is
the
in
way?
New York State. This is in New York State.
Okay, because I was going to say, believe it or not, I think there's something to that extent here in Germany, where I remember my sister-in-law and her now husband, she was pregnant before they were married, and it was a thing that they had to be married. Otherwise, it could be might
crazy.
have to
it's totally
I was
it makes no sense because all it takes in my mind is it's a cheek swab or whatever, it's like, okay, you're related. But
totally. Is this the father?
In fact,
Yeah, okay.
like going into the hospital, like I had actually heard about this case because it was ongoing and it was sort of in the news and stuff. And I like, it was really important to me going into the hospital that we had like a will and a medical directives and all these sort of that sort of legal stuff was in place because we don't have a legal relationship to each other. We still don't have a legal relationship to each other, Andrew and I. So like we're not married, we're not domestic partners, you know, we don't, whatever those rights are that are conferred. So we had to have other documents that were I physically brought them to the hospital because I didn't want there to be any question that if I'm incapacitated in some way, if I'm unconscious or, you know, God forbid something bad happens, that it's really clear that this is the person who's going to have my kid, you know, be raising this child, or this is the person who is the parent of my child.
Yeah.
So that was really important to me, that it was like the ink is dry on those documents before we even go into the hospital. So it's maybe a bit more of like a detailed answer than you wanted.
No, it's super interesting.
It's weird. That's perfect. It is just a weird sort of like loophole that like marriage gives you all these assumed rights because it's assumed parentage, even though sometimes in marriages, like both parents aren't the biological parent, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes people don't even know, I'm sure. I saw recently, I think it was either like a Substack post or something that you were going to be discussing on your own podcast. And it was, I know this term's been put around a lot recently, of like a lavender marriage, which my understanding it's when maybe you can actually just explain what it is better, because I never know if it's like people who have not intentionally said, but basically saying we're marrying despite the fact that one or both of us is gay, or is it when it's like, yeah, they're clearly gay, but they're married anyways. Like, I feel like it's sometimes come from like really,
I won't be able to maybe do justice to the real historical context for the term. I think historically that term was used for when people were trying to conceal their sexuality in more sort of restrictive time, like eras. So you might, if you're a gay man, but you don't want to deal with like the societal stigma around that in another era, you might become married to a woman who she might be gay too. Like, you know, so it may, you know, and so I think the term originates from a place of like secrecy and trying to be like safe and societally like accepted. So that's my understanding of sort of the history of the term. I think now it's become this sort of pop culture term of like, we're like lavender married. It's like, you know, it's like me and my gay bestie, like, you know, and I have a lot of, I did write about this on our Substack.
I was going to say, I brought it up because you were like,
I don't like the term. I don't like the term.
Okay, and I wanted to ask,
and why? I think that was something that was really, I found really funny. I had a blast with the comments that were on that story worth like docu-short about our relationship. And one of the things that came up a lot was that people were like, oh, lavender marriage, this is great. Lavender marriage. I love a lavender marriage. I aspire to a lavender marriage, you know, like all these sorts of things. And I was like, why does that sort of like make me feel ick? Like when I see that term. So I really had to think about it, which is why I wrote about it. I wrote about it in longer form for the Substack. Cause I was like, I need to think about why that term makes me feel weird. But, you know, in short, I think it's because people feel like they need to translate our relationship into like language that feels comfortable. Oh, we can put you into a box where like you're basically married. You're like a married couple, and we're not a married couple. Like that's the whole point, is that we're not married. This is not a marriage. And I think that it sort of like is antithetical to the point of us trying to do something that's different. You know, and it's not me trying to be like, oh, I'm so special, like you know, main character syndrome. It's more about, why do we feel the need to translate everything into marriage instead of questioning whether marriage is the right idiom at all?
Yeah.
And like, that's what I want. That's what I want to question is like the necessity of marriage being the be all end all of like how people are supposed to live their lives, how you're supposed to set up your life with like one exclusive partner. And what I was responding to in the Substack was also that there was a recent article that had come out, a couple articles that had come out about this sort of topic, where it was literally people who had legally married one another and had a sort of a weird regressive kind of approach, in my opinion, to it, where it was like there was one couple that was profiled in the Washington Post, and disclaimer was like, it's a friend of ours that actually wrote the article. So I talked to him about it before I sent out this newsletter. I was like, just so you know, I'm going to go in hard on this couple, but it's like a straight woman and a gay man, and they got married and they had like a whole like traditional wedding, white dress, the cake, the flowers.
So you're talking about that, yeah.
And then they talk a lot about how they are, they do have sex with each other, even though they're not like sexually attracted to each other, and they're like monogamous to each other because they want to honor the bonds of marriage or whatever. And I'm like, this is so weird to me, because it's what it is. It's like you've gotten to the point where you're like, okay, we have a very special bond that we want to continue for life. But the only way that we can conceive of doing it is through like worshiping at the altar of like marriage as the only way to do it. So we have to fit our relationship into that by getting the tuxedo and the white dress, having the party, the sexual fidelity aspect to it, as if like that's somehow essential to having someone that you spend your life with, is that you have to be like, you know, I don't know. It's just, to me, I found that so like weird. And, you know, God bless, like if you're happy, you're happy. And probably also they have I think they have like a big social media, not for nothing, they have like a big social media following. So who knows how much of this is for the cameras and how much of this is like in reality behind the curtain. But I was like, yeah, it seems like you've got it switched around, where it's like you got as far as the point of the non-traditional relationship, but then you're like, well, I guess we better get married.
Yeah. And do all the things that we have been told we quote should do to.
Yeah. So I think that's why,
live up to
and I also think
standard.
like there's something about the history of the term lavender marriage, where it's like the homosexuality is like a point of shame that needs to be concealed with the trappings of heterosexuality, nuclear family, in order to make it acceptable to society. That I think that also kind of makes me feel like, ew, no, like, no, we're not doing that. Like,
yeah. Talk to me about other people and this relationship that the two of you have, the co-parenting relationship, namely prospective, past or future romantic partnerships. If there's agreements as far as, this is our primary family, therefore fine if you want to have different partners or date. But like, and just to clarify, I know I mentioned this, but you do live together?
Right now we do. We're not.
Okay.
Basically what we're committed to right now is that we're committed to living in close proximity to one another as we raise our kids. Right now that means living under the same roof, which has worked out great. But, for the majority of our friendship, we were not roommates. It's not something I consider to be like an essential part of our relationship. I think like the dream is something like, those like side-by-side duplexes in New Orleans, where it's like,
Totally. Everyone wants it with their best friend.
So share a front porch. Maybe there's a door in between. The kids can go in between. Something like that, I think, is like the utopian ideal. But, the reality of New York City real estate is also that like, it is what it is. And it's been very like a great setup, especially when like for like infant stage, newborn, that co-parenting, much easier to do it when you're in the same space and have it actually be like sort of a equal lift. But I think this is by far the biggest question we get. And the biggest point of curiosity is about like, what happens to
I hate to be so predictable, by the
not
way.
at all. Because I think
I know everyone's wondering. It's
just like the elephant in the room whenever the conversation comes up about our setup, is that, and it's a very natural question, because we're talking about this idea of like this forced idea of nuclear fidelity, and like, and that's not what we want, and not what we're doing. Yeah. That's not even how both of us are single, like romantically single right now. But even now, as single people, like we live together, we have our child together, but like what we really want to aspire towards is a much more kind of non-nuclear setup where people, other people have parental relationships to our child, or like familial relationships at least. I would say, it's difficult to have a parental role unless you like live under the same, like live in proximity, but definitely to have like a family relationship to our child, even if they're not blood related. And I think we have a lot of those relationships. I think it would have been impossible to get this far in our parenting journey without our friends' support, and a lot of those people actually child-free friends who have been, very involved in our child's life, or all the way. I don't need for all my friends to be involved in my child's life. Just to be clear, like I think even just having friends who are maybe child-free or not, to like tolerate this sort of like new season of life, and be able to say like, okay, well, the context and how we're going to hang out is going to be a little different for a while or whatever. Even that level is fine. I don't require that all my friends are like kid people or whatever. But all this to say, like, I think for me, the idea of family is being much more expansive than just like two people raising a kid. So I'm coming to it from that perspective to answer the question about like romantic partners. I think we don't know what we don't know, because we haven't met these prospective potential partners really. I haven't done a lot of dating, only like a little bit in the last like year or so. So it will be something to navigate. Obviously, it will be something to navigate, and it will depend on who those people are and what the nature of the relationship is. But our commitment is to our child first, and so that's always going to come first. And I think like any parent who's maybe like a divorced parent who's dating or something like that, like it's not that weird. It's not that uncommon.
I was going to say many people navigate this
in different contexts.
Divorce, solo parents, or if you're non-monogamous relationships.
Right. So in that sense, there's not something so different about it. The only difference is that Andrew and I were never previously married. We never had a contentious divorce. We never, or any kind of divorce. So
so simple.
But in the sense of dating, I think probably the most familiar analog would be like a divorced parent dating or a single parent dating. You know that your commitment is to your child first, and that anyone that you bring into your life is going to have to be, an enthusiastic, like not just like tolerating your parenthood, but wanting to be a part, maybe like interested in being part of like a non-traditional dynamic. Maybe it's a person who, always wanted to have kids or wasn't sure that they wanted to have kids, but this sort of allows a sort of like sideways path into being involved in a child's life. I would say for myself, I'm not looking for like my romantic partner to be a co-parent. I already have a co-parent. But I think the more like interested adults and like people that are around to love your child is great. So I think my son can only benefit from that. I think one thing is that certainly like Andrew and I are now in a position to be much more involved in each other's dating lives in a way. Like we have a lot of boundaries around that, but what I mean by that is like, because we share a child, like I will have a vested opinion in his any boyfriends that he's going to bring into the dynamic, or like introduce to our child, things like that, in a way that maybe I wouldn't have before. I still would have had an opinion about it. It's my best friend, but but it I think that will be, something a little bit different. But like in terms of how does it work? Like I think the question from a lot of people, not from you, but I think from a lot of people comes from the assumption that once I find a romantic partner, that person's going to be my priority. And like, of course I'm going to go move in with my partner and then leave my family in the dust, or, and I think that like, that's sort of the subconscious source of some of those questions, is that like, well, of course your romantic relationship has to come first, because we're told,
like this is like a placeholder
exactly.
Now
or a second or a last resort, that like, oh, I wasn't able to find the partner, so I'm just have this like stand-in partner. And, until like the real thing comes along, again, this is just like, I think the subconscious narrative that people have. And I think it really blows people's mind. That's like, well, what if my romantic life is not actually the center of my life, and it is something that I'm interested in pursuing. I do want to have a romantic partner. Get into my DMs. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I do want to date. I do want to have relationships, and very interested in that, cultivating that part of my life. But it's not the core of my life. I have, I do have a platonic partner. I have a child. I have like, those relationships are so secure and really do for me are sort of the center. And I'm sure that people listening will think, well, then like that dynamic's not going to be for everybody. That's true. Like, not everybody is for me. Not everybody has to be for me. Like, it only has to be one person who wants to be in this type of dynamic and maybe has a similar sort of philosophy towards their romantic life, that they want to have that companionship and that sort of like romantic intimacy and emotional intimacy, but like may not want that to be the center of everything that they do and they are. So that's going to cut out a bunch of the pool for me. The fact that I'm 40 already cuts out a bunch of the pool for me, but that's just that's the reality of it. The smaller pool doesn't necessarily mean it's a worse pool. It's just different. And
no, I think of it as like a finessing or a honing or a sharpening of like what you want. It's wonderful.
I mean,
in a sense that you now have this clarity.
Do you think
there.
Like there are moments where I'm just like, oh my God, I've made things very difficult for myself, dating wise. There are moments where I think that, again, back to our point about you're never going to make a choice where you don't have moments of being like, oh shit, did I do the right thing? So I do sometimes wonder, I'm like, is there, like, who are the people that are out there for whom this dynamic will work? And I do think like what I discovered is that like in some of the dates that I've been on in the past year, like, again, there are people who are dads who are out there dating, who are single dads or divorced dads or whatever, and I think actually coming into this season of, I came to parenthood, I guess somewhat on the later side, I guess, that by this season of life, many people who are in my dating pool who are in their 40s have been through some shit. They've been married, they've been divorced, they've, been parents or whatever. There's like, they come to it with different life experience and I think have been pretty open-minded in a way that like, it hasn't really been like that mind-blowing in a surprising way for people. And I think much less so for Andrew. I can't speak for him directly, but I think for him, it's actually opened the door in a lot of ways for there's a lot of gay men who maybe don't have, who have been curious about parenthood or really interested in parenthood, and the paths for them are all pretty much very expensive. Like you have to pay a lot to form a family as a man, as a gay man specifically, because you either the surrogacy route or adoption, it all can be very prohibitive. So there are a lot of people I think who are in the position of men who are deciding to be child free or not, and feeling like they actually the finances have forced that decision for them. So I think that has been interesting because I think people are like, oh, dating a dad, like as a gay man, like dating someone who's a father, seems so cool, like, and it's like, it's an opportunity and something that's like kind of interesting for people. So again, I don't want to speak for him, but I think like that's been largely his experience is that again, there's some people it's not going to be for them. That's fine. But for it's actually been sort of a point of interest.
Yeah. Interesting. It makes sense. And it's interesting to see how for you, maybe some people might associate, or you could have this idea of like, oh, this could be construed as not a positive, but for him, it's
and I think that goes back to like the heterosexual gender dynamics of it all.
Totally.
Because queer people are coming to the table with a much more expansive set of possibilities around what family is, and definitely heterosexual or men who date women are coming to it with maybe the most limited cultural vocabulary around how to build a family. Again, broadly speaking. So I do think that is a difference, and that is a imbalance, for sure. It does mean my dating pool is smaller than his dating pool, but for that reason. But all choices have their positive and negative consequences. And that was one that I was willing to take on.
I'm curious, before we wrap up, I mean, you talked about, you obviously came to this decision with initial ambivalence, and not just ambivalence, but no, I'm going to stay child-free. And so 2 years into parenthood, having pursued it in a way that feels like it's tailor-made in a sense, which is really, because you've questioned the assumptions we have around the roles that we take on so often in parenthood and the way that this path traditionally would look for someone who is heterosexual and, generally would have assumed you'd have a child with a man who is straight, I should clarify, because of course you've done that. How have things been thus far? And I mean, are you enjoying motherhood? Do you have those moments of oh my God, what have I done? Where are you at in this moment today?
I mean, yes, of course I've had moments of WTF.
Real talk.
I think any parent in any context will tell you that they have had those. So I'll start off by saying it's been great. It really has been a grand adventure. I'm enjoying parenthood more and more as my kid gets older. I'm not a person who was into the baby, infancy, newborn phase. It was not really for me. It's something to talk, get through for me, as he's been able to start talking and have a personality, and he drove me to the point of madness this morning. If you're talking to me about today, Wednesday,
you're
I was coming into this interview and I was oh my God, my kid was such an a-hole this morning. It was so funny. Coming into a conversation about the decision to have children, but he's 2. So that is par for the course, and developmentally all whatever. All this to say, this question though, to me philosophically is a little bigger than just am I enjoying being a mom? Because
absolutely. Tell me more.
Think that something that I've always I don't know how do I say it. Something that has always bugged me is when people say stuff about how I didn't know what love was until I had a kid, and I I didn't know the true meaning of blah blah blah, and I didn't it opened up this whole nother plane of reality, and I've always thought that to be a myth, and now I know it to be a myth. It's that's a myth.
Yay.
It's
hearty applause.
I just think that that is subconsciously, when people say things like that, it's because they want to justify their decision. But it's you see that outside of having kids too. You see when people say things like, oh, don't go into such and such profession unless it's truly a calling, and you couldn't imagine yourself doing anything else, then you should become a writer, or then you should become a doctor, or whatever it is. People always say that about their own profession because they want to elevate the decision that they made into something that is beyond a choice, but something that was divinely inspired, that they have no other route in life other than to do this thing. And so then it has meaning, and it gives people the sense of meaning and purpose. I never would want to tell people not to feel a sense of meaning and purpose, but I think expressing it that way is so it's just so simple to me, in a derogatory simple in a bad way. it is a unique relationship. Obviously, I've never had a relationship like this before. I've never had a relationship of this kind of dependency before. This is someone who relies on me for everything. And, obviously that is unique among my other relationships. It would be weird if I had that dynamic with anybody else. But so it's not to say that it's not something like different and special, but I definitely do not feel like, oh, I unlocked some magical, like, secret level of consciousness or a different type of love. Like, I think, that's just a myth. It's just a myth. It just is. And I sort of alluded to this a little bit, like the idea of like sort of insta love is not always true for some people. Do have that feeling where you give birth and you look into the newborn eyes and you're like, oh my God, I'm like, I love this. Or even maybe before you give birth, you already feel that sense of like, I really love this creature. I didn't have that. And it was like, I had to get to know him. I was like, this is a stranger.
Yeah.
I've never met this guy.
Yeah. Makes sense. Seems a little sus to me.
Let's just see. Let's see. Is he cool? Like, and it's just, I'm being obviously facetious, but I did feel, like it was a gradual process for me to adjust to parenthood and to really feel more than like a biological instinct to keep this little beast alive, but to actually feel like a relationship of love and reciprocity of that love, like, I think is a process. It has been great though. Like, it's been really fun, and I'm definitely like enjoying the journey, I guess, so to speak. But I think it's like, it's a bigger question for me, just because it's like, it's an unexpected path for me in life. So there are still those moments, I think, that I alluded to before, where I'm like, whoa, this is so surreal. I have a son, like, that person is related to me and just like lives in my house now. Like, that's crazy.
What are you doing here?
Just lives here. I just brought him. I just brought him a roommate one day, and he just like lives in this house. This is his house too. So like, I still have those moments too. But I do, I'm dithering a little bit here because I want to return back to something that you said when I first asked you the question about, like, tell me more about the podcast, tell me about the evolution of the podcast, which is that I still feel really strongly of that. Like, I think I am very happy being a mom. And I think I would have been really happy not being a mom. Like, that's not me saying like there's no emotion on that statement. It's not like I yearn for one path over the other or whatever. Yeah. But I really feel like I would have a great, awesome life had things progressed in the way that I had initially planned them to be, that, and I have such a great life that I couldn't have imagined now. So like, I loved hearing you say that from sort of like the perspective of a child-free person too, that you're like, if I'd had a kid, that probably would have been great too, And I think that of course we can never know like what things would be like on the other version of your, like, you may envision like the most ideal version of that when you think about the road not taken. But like, in my mind, I think like, I love my son. He's so awesome. I'm so glad he's here. And, so glad to be doing this really. And I do feel a sense of like calling in the way you described to, I know I just went through this whole thing about like, it's annoying when people say that things are a calling, but I do, the reason I'm tired, but the reason
it does exist,
the reason I
okay?
talk about my family so like, so much is not because I think I've made like a better choice than somebody else, or like, that everyone should like find a platonic person to be the biological co-parent of their child. Obviously I'm not saying that, but I do feel really drawn to speak about this publicly, to write about it on our Substack, to, talk to people like you who are creating the space for these types of conversations, because I just feel like it has unlocked so much for me to rethink this order of operation, kind of everything that we've talked about. Like it has unlocked so much for me and led me down such an interesting like route, and has led me closer to like sort of living my values like every day, that I really do feel compelled to talk about it, not because I'm saying everyone should do what I did, but to say that like, just to encourage the examination of the decisions and trying to untangle them from what you're supposed to do or expected to do. And that part of it does feel like the calling and a calling to also build more resources with people who aren't your husband or wife, and to like resource share with your friends, and to like build, have that sort of like non-nuclear support system. That to me feels like such something that I'm very drawn to talk about a lot. So long answer to a short question of, am I enjoying it?
I have to say, I love that this is your calling to speak about this, to be able to like showcase and encourage others to examine their lives and their decisions, and to know that there are different paths available to them. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I could talk to you for the next 4 hours, but maybe some other time.
If there's anything that like you're like, oh, this is a big thing that we missed, you can always ask, and
we can always have you back onto the podcast. So before we wrap up, I will definitely make sure to link to the Substack, the podcast. You had referenced where I had first discovered your story, which was Storyworth, did you say? Okay, we'll link to that as well. But tell us, I mean, what else do we need to know? What are you up to? Do you want to make a plug for anything?
Well, I think the main place that we're putting stuff out is on Substack. Really trying to like build an interested community there. Again, talking about non-nuclear family, talking about friendship, and trying to put out writing there almost every week. So that's sort of like the most active hub of like where our writing is. We are working on a book proposal right now that is that is drawn from our story. It's a little bit of sort of like a co-written memoir, a little bit of a narrative memoir, I should say. And like sort of the idea of co-writing, I think is really compelling, because we always think about the idea of sort of singular experience and like my experience and my experience, and very interested in this project and sort of like interrogating the idea of a shared experience and collective experience. So that's something that's in its early stages, but we're working on a proposal and hope to develop that a little bit more. But in the meantime, all of our sort of creative output right now is through the Substack, and it's kind of the best way to keep in touch. It's called Emergency Contacts.
Amazing. Okay. I love the name of the Substack, by the way. And again, we'll be sure to direct people there. They should consider subscribing. And thank you for coming on today and for this amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really fun. I feel like so much more energized now. You can maybe tell than when I logged on. Still caffeinating.
We could say it's the coffee, but I'll attribute that to our amazing, thought-provoking conversation.
Don't go just yet. I have one more thing I want to share with you today, and that is an ask. If you are enjoying the podcast and you have not already left us a rating and a review on your favorite podcast app, you can give us a star rating on the Spotify app. If you listen in the Apple Podcast app, you can leave a rating as well as a review, i.e. share a few kind words about this podcast and how it's impacted you. This goes a really long way in helping our podcast get discovered by other listeners, prospective, or I should say fence sitters who need some help with their decision. It'll just take you a quick moment, and it truly does go a long way. So again, rating, review, make sure as well that you're subscribed to the podcast so you always get future episode updates. And otherwise, I wish you a beautiful rest of your day.